Welcome to Project Fast Fish here on Mike's Motorworks, and today is a little unique because we are going to review what's happened with Project Fast Fish since we started filming and documenting and journalizing the project. It all happens right now here on Project Fast Fish. So for those not familiar with our channel, Project Fast Fish was the hub and the start of Mike's Motorworks. In fact, Mike's Motorworks bridged as an idea from Project Fast Fish because of the success that it had. Our first video was launched in April of 2020. That was right in the midst of the COVID pandemic when everybody was kind of staying at home, right? Since I had time off, I was like, let's do some work on the car, all right? And let's go ahead and journalize everything that's going on here on camera so that we could share that with the world. Because the idea here is, look, this is the first time that I've done anything like this, all right? I have never worked at this level on a car before, especially with body work, okay? You know, and even that 349 build, that was the first time I had a chance to assemble an engine. Now, mind you, I had guided practice, and I'm having guided practice here, okay, in the sense of YouTube videos and information and so on and so forth that I'm sharing. And the whole idea here is that if I can do it, you can do it. Effectively, I am building a vision here, okay? And my vision was set forth in place by that first video that was, again, launched in 2020. And I'll leave a link for that video right there. In fact, that'll be the whole playlist if I can get the playlist up there, okay? Since then, you kind of see me build this thing from that vision, okay? Now, there are some mistakes that I made, and I'll admit that. I'm going to show them to you here in a few minutes, but there are some things that are turning out absolutely gloriously. So let's go ahead and start with our review process. So to start our review, we are right in the engine bay, and you got a good shot of the cowl itself. This cowl is brand spanking new. In fact, here's what I did, all right? Back a few years ago when I was in between jobs and what have you, in between careers, my brother and I took a moment to go ahead and strip the car completely down to its shell and give it a base coat of primer. Well, that was before the epoxy primers became mainstream and were way too expensive for us to invest in. So we just invested in some basic primer, and it didn't stick well. And of course, primer being porous caused it to rust through. And so I have found myself having to strip this thing out again. I went ahead and peeled off all of the undercoating, got it down to its base bare metal, and stripped out the inside here. And then I brought my attention up to this area here. And what I ended up doing was I ended up removing the cowl and removing the A-pillar caps and completely replacing these A-pillar caps. So the A-pillar caps, which go from here down underneath the cowl, are all brand spanking new. They're units from AMD, and one side's from Sherman, and I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. And of course, this top cowl needed to be replaced anyway. So when I pulled it off, I wasn't trying to salvage it. I was just like, let's get it off. Let's try to get it off as clean as we can so we can save what we need on there, like the tabs and what have you, and then compare it to the new one going on there, and let's get it back on, right? And that's exactly what I did. So this is a brand new piece from AMD. So up at the front area, okay, everything is original. It's the original Firewall. I had to do some patchwork on there. I did some welding patches there. And then, of course, I put undercoating under here because this will never really see paint. I didn't want to leave it raw metal and have it rust out. So we have some epoxy primer and some Herculiner up underneath there inside of our vents and underneath the cowl on the upper Firewall. So you got original metal here, and everything else in the middle here is all original. Now that includes the original Radiator Support here, okay? This was undented. Again, this thing received a few bumps and bruises along the way in its life, you know, when Pop owned it, and but the Radiator Support itself remained in good shape, never dent. There was not any twist here, okay? There was a couple of things that happened in the very, very front sail panel, or the front fender panel here, the one that goes across here, I forget the technical name off the top of my head, and needed some fender work, and there was some work in the back that needed to be done, and I'll show you that here shortly. But this is all original metal, all original steel up in here, all right? And in fact, this was so good that, you know, this was the easiest part for me to kind of reassess and get a look on and what have you. Now, along the way, when I was doing some repairs, there were some mistakes. Let me show you. Down here, the most glaring thing that stands out is this spot right in here. And my biggest mistake here was there were some pinhole wells, right? And this metal had gotten very thin. Why had it gotten thin? Well, one, back in the day, we took this to the sandblaster, okay, and had them sandblast it, but we didn't do a very good job of airing it out, and a lot of moisture collected up into here, okay, and caused these little pinholes to kind of form. So when I yanked off the cowl, all these pinholes became very apparent. Additionally, that metal was really, really thin. Hindsight, what I should have done was, instead of working the welds from the outside, I should have worked them from the other side out, all right? So I should have worked them from the inside out to here. Now, overall, it's going to be okay, because remember, we have that little deflection panel here that goes across your little plastic panel that goes on the E-bodies. That goes in this area right here to kind of give it some protection. And we're adding Herculiner from about here down. So again, here down and over here. So overall, it should be okay. Again, I made sure that the welds were as good as I can make it. And could I have done a better job there? Maybe. I'm still learning, and I was still learning, and I'll admit to you that I am still learning as I go, but I am getting better at it. Is it horrible that I did it this way? No, okay? Could it have been done better? Maybe. Hindsight 2020. Again, I'm happy with it because I know what's happening up there, all right? Now, there's some other small cosmetic mistakes that I made as well. Let me show you up top here. One of the mistakes I made up here was right in this zone right here, okay? And this here is where the firewall panel goes up and over, okay, and the cap goes under, all righty? And when I drilled this out, okay, to get these parts out, this middle panel here, because this is the cowl, there's the firewall here, the upper firewall, and then the A-pillar cap. When I drilled it out, I had to drill a lot of metal to get this piece down up in there, right? So when I was doing some spot welding, trying to get that to stay, I was having a hard time getting it to stay, so on and so forth. So as an impromptu moment, without thinking too much about it, I was like, hey, let me just go ahead and run a bead of weld all the way down that line. It'll keep it in place for sure, and you know, whatever, it'll be hidden over that fender, because that fender goes right up over here, right? So I was like, yeah, it'll be fine, I'll go ahead and do it. So I went ahead and ran a hard bead here and a hard bead down here, not here, but in this area as well. Could it have been done better? Maybe, but I think overall it's one of those things that are par for the course. Now, the biggest glaring thing over here is two different things. One, this A-pillar cap came from Sherman. It was a Sherman piece. It was not an AMD piece. Why? Because the other side, AMD had it in stock when I was looking at getting this done, but this side they did not, right? So I went ahead and made the decision, well, since it's in stock, I'll go ahead and get the one, and I'll get the other piece from somewhere else. It was about $20 cheaper, okay? And that other piece wasn't fulfilled at AMD for another few months, okay? So I was like, okay, whatever, that's fine. So I went ahead and got this, and then when I tried to test fit it, I couldn't get anything to test fit in right. So I had to cut this to get this piece in here, okay? I'll leave that link for the video up top there, all right? And while it turned out okay, I'm not overall happy with what's going on here, okay? When you can see this weld like it is. And I was still learning, okay? I should have probably taken more time with the butt welding process or the grinder, but I was having a hard time with the grinder, getting it up in there just right and what have you. And let's be honest, the idea is to be a welder, not a grinder, right? And so I was like, you know what, let me just leave it. I'll get some all metal and it'll be fine, all right? And that's what I'm gonna do, is I wanna use some filler here. I'm gonna use some filler down at this spot as well, because it's definitely needed. And of course, down here, I'm gonna show you this here in a few minutes. So down here, everything is awesome and glorious. I'm really happy with the way things turned out here. In fact, when you watch that painting episode, I had to go back through and recoat all of this side of the car itself. In fact, the whole front cap of the car, the whole front end. And what I ended up doing wrong was I ended up mixing that paint initially incorrectly, okay? When I say that, it was still glutenated on the bottom and I didn't get a good thorough mix on it. So I actually went out and purchased a paint mixer, one of those pneumatic shaky dealies, and then I ran it through with the proper 1-to-1 ratio for that epoxy primer, and it worked gloriously. So everything up here is ready for its next stages in the process. Now this hole right here was actually from Pop. See, what he did back in the day was he ran a battery down the side of the car, right, into the trunk, and this is where the battery originally sat at, I believe. Is this side? Yeah. Anyway, this is where a battery terminal went, okay? So this is where it came through, and he kind of punched that out, scored that out there. I'm going to leave it. Why am I going to leave it like that? Well, because it's something that he did, and it's something that, you know, that's his mark on the car itself, or when he went and moved that battery to the back of the vehicle itself. So that's going to stay there. But everything else, I am absolutely happy with. Now, obviously, our mount points, I'm going to have to go ahead and when I remove the car off of the chassis itself, this frame jig, I'm going to go ahead and retouch up those spots that I couldn't get to with the paint gun. Now, it's obvious that something is missing here. In April 2022, I went ahead and started to remove the floor of the car so that I can get the new floor pans in, okay? And so I went ahead and removed everything, cleaned it up really, really nice, right? And as you can see, it all has been epoxy primer. Now, all this tape here on the top, that's on purpose. Why? Because underneath the tape is some zinc primer or some weld-through primer, right? So as I'm working on the car, I'm gonna do some work on the roof and so on and so forth. I didn't want that to get marred up and have to recoat that again. So I just taped it up and it should be good. But the firewall itself looks really, really good up in here. There are some things up here by where the plug and the patches go that's gonna be, that's there. But in all honesty, okay, I'm gonna lizard skin the entire interior side here. So after I get all the metal down, all the welds ground down, and I get the subframe connectors on, there's gonna be a complete coating of both the lizard skin thermal and the lizard skin sound deadener all inside the interior here, okay? But yeah, there was some work that was needed. I got like a little slag up here from, and some welds up here from where there was a hole, and it was kind of thin. And instead of making patches, the welds were thin enough where I could just say, let me just go ahead and use that welder and just do a couple of quick little tacks and kind of clean everything up, and that's exactly what I did. And again, that's way up here in this area, and that's way in the back by the where the fuse panel and such goes. Of course, this will be your master cylinder, your steering column, and all that good stuff over there. So we're in good shape. I also ran ahead and ran inside the frames. I went ahead and ran the internal frame coat from Eastwood, so I'm confident on those. I could just go ahead and leave it and recoat it. I'm going to blow it out, obviously, before I put the sheet metal back on the top and the floor pans, so we're good. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about my frame jig here. This frame jig was made for the purpose of keeping the body straight as possible based off of how it was when we made the jig, okay? So there's a lot of debate on the need for a jig. Do you need to have one? Can you just do this on floor jacks and make sure everything is level? Did I make the right kind using tube as opposed to using I-beams and such? Let me tell you, I went ahead and used the best rate that I found most reasonably possible. Why? One, I knew I was going to need to be mobile with this thing. I got a small, tiny garage. You guys have seen it. This is not the best place to work on a project like this, okay? So I went ahead and did it that route. Two, I wanted a way to keep everything supported and in line, okay, while I was taking off big components like the floor pans and some of the stuff that I'll be getting to in the back, all right? So that was all factors into creating this thing right here, right? Now, honestly, I think I made a couple of mistakes when I made this. I should have ran some riggers, okay, some cross beams here, and then should have just X-framed or Z-framed the each individual frame. But, you know, overall, it's great. It's working good. And the cool thing is with the leveling feet, I can go in, and when I need to work on something like I did with the roof, where I needed to make sure that the car is level, I can set those leveling feet, make sure that this is level itself. I'll be confident the car is level, and then make sure everything is good to go. And then I can go ahead and weld those pieces into shape as it's needed, all right, and pull everything back in. And that's exactly what I had to do when I worked on the roof of the car itself. Speaking of the roof of the car, this is brand new sheet metal from Dynacorn. It is that front roof brace, okay? It supports the structures or the cage structure of the roof itself, okay? Now there are some things I still need to get done on the roof because the roof has rotted away. Why is it rotted away? Well, that's a very interesting question. This roof or this car, OE, came with a vinyl top. What didn't they do in the 70s with the vinyl tops? Well, they didn't seal them, okay? I'm not even sure they received a full coat of paint. They were just glued on there. And of course, as you know, that vinyl, although it lets some of the water go through, the condensation, all that good stuff, not so much. So we had a lot of rust work that was needed in the roof. Additionally, when this car sat outside, a lot of those holes had already formed and this roof rotted. And I don't even believe it was completely sandblasted on the inside. So it needs a lot of love and a lot of work. Thus, this box right here, okay? And I was able to get a lot of the roof structure from AMD. So that's gonna be the future. So that brings the next question. Why am I not working on the roof right now? I have the panels, I could do it, okay? Why am I not working on it? Well, there's two reasons for that. Reason number one, okay? When they build these cars, okay, they effectively start with the base foundation of the car, okay? And this is coming from my friends over where they do all those really cool MOPAR resters in the MOPAR graveyard, all right? But effectively, okay, this here is one of the first panels they put in, okay? They put the frame in, okay? They get that in, they get the rockers in. Then the next panel they put on is this underseat floor pan, okay? And that holds the wheel wells and everything else. Elsewhere in the factory, the roof structure is made and the two are mated together later in the process, okay? So they will effectively lay the floors, the rear seat floor plan, the floors, okay? The side cowls and all that good stuff, even the trunk decks, okay? And then, okay, and the wheel wells, of course, and then they'll lay in the roof support. So I'm going to follow that formula and make sure that my foundation is still good and set. Yes, it is because of that jig I made. I get it. But, you know, I'm going to go ahead and wait on that process so I can make sure that everything is dialed in completely before I put that in. And honestly, it's kind of scary work to do. So that's also why I'm waiting on it. You know, everything is in high visibility. So there's still some corrections I need to make, like with this piece here and what have you. All right. But yeah, everything effectively that AMD makes, I got for the roof. Okay. So that includes the, I got a piece that goes right across here. All righty. There's a piece and a cap that goes down and inside and over the wheel well. And then, of course, I believe this structure I got as well, which is going to be really, really fun. The only thing they didn't make was this inside piece and this inside cap, okay? I even got one of these and the rear support from Dynacorn, so we are set there, okay? Yeah, we're pretty awesome. So what's next for Project Fast Fishing? What do we got to take on? Well, that is pretty huge because as you can see before, I had that end facing this way. Now, the back end is facing this way. Why? Because this is my next area of focus, this entire back of the car. And almost every single panel needs to be touched or replaced, okay? Almost every single panel. Now, there are some good panels, and I'm gonna show you that after I get some stuff cut off, all right? So what we're gonna do later on, and you're gonna catch us on the next episode, is I'm gonna start to work to start pulling some of these pieces off that I need to so I can gain access to cut other panels off where I can create some of the bracing I need to keep the roof structure in place while I replace the panels, because a lot of the things are all welded together and such, and it kind of works like a puzzle, right? So I want to go ahead and start getting that together and supported, okay, before I start tackling and replacing some of these items. Because the next thing that I'm replacing is that rear seat floor pan, and then after that, I'm replacing the rear wheel wells, and there's some other things that also need a little bit of love and attention as well. So I'm going to show you that on the next episode. Finally, to show and showcase how things have gotten a little bit better, not perfect, okay, not perfect, but a little bit better with how I'm making things and using my hands to build things, I want to show you one last piece here on the vehicle. This is some of my more recent work, and while it's not perfect, it does showcase where things are getting a little bit better with my metalwork, welding, and grinding, all right? Now, if you go back and watch some of the first things that I've done, underneath here, the front of this rocker needed to be completely replaced, okay? So I had to rebuild this structure, and I made a couple mistakes when I did that, but I went ahead and rolled with it anyways, right? And of course, you can kind of see where the welds need a little bit of love and what have you that I could do better with. I was like, let me just get the filler in there, and I think we'll be all right. But this here is a visible area where I didn't want to have a lot of the filler at, right? So I went ahead and made this and handmade all of this, and I want to feature on how I did that here in a later episode, okay? But effectively what I did is I just took a straight piece of metal, okay, and then bent the metal here on a little bender, okay, a little brake, and then used a shrinker tool to shrink out my J-form here, and then tack welded little bits and little pieces in here as well, all right? And I get it, it's not perfect, all right? I'm not a professional, I'm learning as I'm going. I learn by doing, okay? So in other words, I'm looking at how to do something, and then I learn how to do it, and then I go out and do it, okay? It's not perfect, but I think for all, you know, essential points and purposes and what have you, I think it's pretty all right. So that's where things currently stand. I'm gonna go ahead and get this little part epoxy primered a little bit later on as I get some more paint from Eastwood. And then, of course, We'll get this all epoxied out later on and get ready for future filler and what have you. Again, not perfect. I'm making mistakes, but I'm learning, all right? And that's the coolest thing, is I'm learning as I'm doing, okay? Learn by doing, and that's the hugest thing. And effectively, with Mike's Motorworks, if I can do it, you can do it. So thank you again so much for watching our little update on Project Fastfish, and make sure you keep tuning in. If you see something I'm doing, you know I'm doing it wrong, and you have another way of doing it, great. Make sure you comment. Don't just be abusive to the way I'm doing things, because hello, I'm learning here. But if you have something creative towards how the process goes, or how you would do it, or what have you, that's absolutely fantastic. We love good, creative, and constructive feedback. And above all else, thanks for watching.